share because that's. Oh, you're recording already, James?
Just started, yeah.
Perfect. Uh, Usual fiddling around. We do less Zoom now these days, guys, than we used to. So I presume you guys, and please keep your cameras on. It's good to see your faces, guys, and I'm sure you will. You guys can see that, okay? Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant. Well, it is an honor, guys. It really is an honor to come on and be asked by James to come on and just share some things with you guys tonight. Anytime I get asked to do this, I often feel quite humbled because I'm often with people that have got many fantastic qualities. I'm better click OK on the screen here. I just ask you, James, if anybody else comes in to keep an eye out, you can let them in just in case it doesn't come up on my screen. But yeah, very humbled to be asked to share tonight, guys. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on a Thursday night, and I'm glad this is recorded as well because sometimes you get the chance to listen back to yourself and hear what questions and other people have asked. So I appreciate your desire to teach and your desire to want to be. I don't know exactly where everybody is, but your desire to teach or teach more or study more or become, more of an official teacher, and whatever capacity you want that to be. I do honestly think we need more and more people like that. And just to say, I'm not going to surprise anybody by saying that the whole desire to teach is not a straightforward path. I feel like it's not going to be straightforward anywhere, probably in the kingdom, but it certainly doesn't feel straightforward in the UK. And it's not been straightforward. So many things we set out to do and we feel called to do in the ministry, and yet sometimes it feels like we keep meeting stumbling blocks. So as a young man, I studied. I didn't study at school. I grew up in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I was very affected by all this. I didn't really put my head down. But I started as a Christian. I started reading the Bible every day for several hours. I just found myself not able to get enough of learning. So I went on to university, studied physio, and I just found myself this new lease of life. Well, if I couldn't learn enough, I was so excited every day by just being able to learn. I think it was a second chance God had given me. So I realized that I wanted to study the Bible more. I want to work in that field. I want to study it, do a master's. I want to just do it as much as possible. But I'll be honest, I did keep meeting stumbling blocks. Like ministry wasn't going to work for me. It was just myself, my wife, the paradigm of the church at that time. My wife wasn't interested in ministry. I felt like I kept banging my head against the wall. Like I was told this isn't going to work, that's not going to work. And I tried to do it. Even when I started to try and do a master's, somebody talked me out of it, thought it's a better idea to do something else, etc., etc. But you know what? One thing I do have in my favor, and I think I developed this growing up, is a dogged determination to do whatever I personally believe God has called me to do. And I want to encourage each of us to do exactly the same thing. Like this flower here, which is blooming in a place that it
Mm.
really shouldn't be. It's found a space to grow through the wall, to grow through this rusty padlock. And I felt like this summarizes for me this drive and determination that I felt that I had, and I feel that we should all have, wherever you're at right now in regards to teaching, that idea, bloom wherever you're planted. Don't allow yourself to give up because everything doesn't seem to fit just right now. You're not able to teach as much as you want it. You can't do that master's just right now or the PhD or it doesn't feel like anyone's listening to you right now. I would encourage you, whatever situation you're in, to keep going because that is definitely something I've done. Not suggesting that I don't still meet roadblocks, I do, but I determined that no one can stop what God has called someone to do. It's a deep conviction that I have. God has called you to do something. It doesn't matter who stands in your way, and I don't mean that ignorantly or disrespectfully towards people, but we've got to keep on going. So I want to share tonight just some thoughts, really 7 thoughts on key lessons for aspiring teachers. These are just my thoughts. There are many other thoughts, I'm sure, and there's many other good papers out there to help us. And again, I feel humbled because, like I say, I'm not necessarily officially recognized teacher myself, but I definitely have developed some skills over the years linked in with my role. So I'm going to share 7 things, but it's just to say some of these sound very simple, but these are things we just need to keep reminding ourselves of. So even though I'm sharing these things tonight with you guys, I would also need to apply them to myself as well. So, first one then, we'll go through them one at a time. So, key lessons for aspiring teachers. What things do we need to make sure that we focus on or not let go of in our desire and determination to teach and to influence other people. This is going to sound like the most obvious thing in the world. You've tuned in tonight for me to tell you that you need to seek God first. Shock horror, no remote surprise there, but this is super duper important. We don't really need me to tell you, but regardless of what teaching we do now, or regardless of what teaching we do in the future, regardless of how important you get, how many conferences you get invited to, how many nights like this you get asked to be involved in, we are disciples first. And I personally believe that as Bible teachers, we should be reading the Bible more than anything else. We should know it more than anything else. Now, I'm saying that it sounds simple. I don't think that's easy. And over the last few years as a Christian minister, I lead the church in Belfast as well. I work a little bit as a physio still today as well. Um, but I find it difficult at times when I've been traveling, I've been at conferences, I've been speaking in different places, or I've been under pressure, or somebody's asked me a difficult question and they need an answer today. They need an answer right now. The pressure, ministry pressures are coming in. It's important that I make sure I seek God first. So I'm saying this to say, as a teacher, I believe this will require discipline in our life. We need to show elements of discipline that we seek God first, regardless of what else is going on around us, that we may delay gratification. We don't go and read that book that we've just ordered from Amazon that's landed in the door. I haven't sought God, I haven't got into the Word yet, but I'm going to hold off on those other things that I feel I want to do because I have a teaching mindset. Every time I read, I always think about what I could share with someone. But I must learn how to put that aside to hear what the Word's saying to me first. Otherwise, what happens to me? I'll burn out. I'll be burnt out. I won't have any energy. I won't have any zeal. I'll not be able to help anyone because I'm just doing it for my own glory and not because God has put it on my heart. God has given me this gift to use. So we have to realize as we go on, this is all the more important because we realize that we've got gifts and interests that the role as a teacher I find you can be very selfish. You know, you can have all these gifts, you can lean yourself towards different things that you're interested in teaching on, and it can all become about you and your interests and your passions. And then people start to applaud you for those things, and then you want to do them even more. And it's like you can end up getting sidetracked because it all becomes, believe it or not, it can all become about you and not about the fact that God is using you and has given you a gift. We're going to look at this later on, 1 Peter 4:10, in order to help others. So I would say, along with that, and seeking God first, that it's important we rely on close disciples who help us and maybe give us input about where our life is at, if maybe that's not so strong. And just that people will know us for our love for God first. I know again this might sound super obvious. People will know us for our love for God first, as love for His Word first, more than they see us as a teacher. They'll see you as a disciple before you're a teacher, and that includes any teacher in the kingdom, no matter how wonderful they are, no matter how well known they are. That's going to apply. So seeking God first, and I say it today because even though it sounds obvious, this can become a challenge, and I've even felt that myself. So seek God first. Um, so the second one I want to look at, then we'll move through these, um, is starting point. So where do you start? You know, where do you start in order to be a teacher? Maybe again, I'm not sure how far along the journey some of us are, but sometimes you don't know where to start. And you've probably heard this a lot in recent years, but get good at listening and being led by the Spirit. The last teaching class I did was in Southeast London. It was on the Holy Spirit, and it's one of my favorite weekends I've ever had. And since then, I've been super aware of in Acts how often they get good. The disciples got good in the book of Acts of referring to the Holy Spirit, that being led by the Holy Spirit. So in terms of a starting point, James has mentioned it already, and Andrew mentioned it. I love apologetics. I love trying to answer the difficult questions because I personally believe there are answers for most things. There's things that God maybe hasn't told us just yet, but there's so many areas that we need to know more about. What ends up happening to some of us, and it's happened to me, is you get confused. You know, where do I start? There's just so many things to know. I've started learning about one thing, and then a group of people in the church have asked me about something else. I haven't read about that yet, so I don't know. I get confused. What am I supposed to do? And what I'd say is a very early starting point here, and I have to learn to do this, is when I'm working on a task, try and stay focused on that task and don't try not to jump around. Okay, there's pressing needs. I've got a calendar. I'll write it in. I'm going to start next month in looking at a different subject matter. But for now, I'm going to stay focused and try not to jump around. I think that's important. So I've said this a few times to people over the years. Where do I start? Well, deal with what you hear. I always say this: deal with what you hear, and or deal with the needs. So what is it that I'm hearing a lot about? The reason I got into the apologetics to some extent was I heard a lot of questions from students, people who had drifted in their faith. Some people came to Belfast and drifted in their faith. People had deep, searching existential questions, and no one was able to answer them. People, again, like Andrew said earlier, they said, "Look, just pray, just believe." I don't find that satisfactory, personally speaking. And most of the people who got that answer didn't find that satisfactory. So again, deal with what you hear, which obviously requires some element of being led by your heart. So that's not just head knowledge. Your heart is affected by the things that you hear people struggling with, and they don't have the desire to dig deep the way some of us might. So that is the thing that we can do. So deal with what you hear. What is it that you're always hearing? We'll look at a scripture, 1 Peter 3, the most common scripture and where the word apologia comes from, apologetics, which means defense. So just turn to 1 Peter 3. I do have a few slides up. Sorry, I don't have the scriptures on. I know some of us are used to seeing them on slides these days, but um, 1 Peter 3 and then verse 14, I know we'll know this scripture really well, but even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear with their threats. Do not be frightened. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. So that's the starting point. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, that who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. So, what are we always hearing, and are we prepared? If you have got the gift of teaching and you want to develop the gift of teaching, we really should be people who are able to explain why we have hope. Now, again, we're not going to have every answer for everything, but we have a hunger to be able to explain the truth. Paul said regularly went into the amphitheater in the temple, went in and regularly reasoned with them and explained and reasoned with them, why Christ had to suffer, why he was who he claimed to be. So, alongside saying that, deal with what you hear and being prepared, I would say, develop a plan and be intentional. If your desire is to teach, you feel called to teach, and you want to do it more, you don't know where to start. So you get a starting plan. You're going to deal with what you hear, but sit down and develop a plan. I developed a plan a few weeks ago, and I decided in September I'm going to look at this, in October I'm going to look at this, November, December. But I knew in the back of my mind that some of this subject matter might take longer than a month, but that's okay. I'll just kick it down the road a bit longer. But get a plan. Maybe we've already done this. I'm saying this tonight, and I'm realized that many of you maybe already are doing some of these things anyway. But yeah, develop a plan. So where to start, what to focus on, deal with what you hear. That's a good starting point. Is a desire to be prepared to answer and help people around you. The third thing, there you go, ditch the pride. So again, I know we're going to be at different stages in our journeys probably tonight. Some of us have taught many times on different stages, and some of us maybe haven't. It doesn't really matter what the capacity is. The reality is we're still all at risk of developing pride. The chances are, if you're on this call tonight and want to be an aspiring teacher, you're a thinker. And I would have to say as well, let's be real, you're probably more intelligent than average because you tend to think, you tend to study, and maybe you've done a master's, maybe you've done a degree, maybe you want to do a PhD. And you're not saying it about yourself, of course, and I'm not saying it about myself, but people that know you would probably say, yeah, they're pretty sharp, they're pretty smart, but this is an area of strength for them. And that's probably normal, that we would think that way. And as we develop the gift of teaching, guess what happens? Like anything you do a lot, you get better at it, right? You get stronger. You recognize where your strengths lie, and hopefully you recognize where your weaknesses lie, but you start to teach other people. And in the case of, I don't want to say it of myself so much, but I've certainly had moments where it seemed like everybody was coming to me with something, and you start to see or could see yourself as a key person. So we've got to watch out for that, right? We've got to actively, again and again, maybe some of us are sitting going, that doesn't happen to me yet. But if you aspire to teach, it may happen at some point. that it's important that we actively deal with pride, that we go on and actively deal with that. And you know what? People will notice if you don't. I know some of this might not feel very relevant to you right now, but if you want to develop that gift and start to teach more often, it will become relevant and people will notice if you're not dealing with pride. So what I would say about that, and I had to learn this, is don't be a know-it-all. I mean, I might be saying the obvious. I mean, I'm sure we're all going to agree with me there, aren't we? And I asked myself this question after many talks and Q&As that I've done. How do I feel when I know the answer versus how do I feel when I don't know the answer? Does that break me not knowing the answer? Do I get a heightened sense of self because I know the answer? There shouldn't be too big a contrast. And I'm trying to watch this in myself between the moments when I say, you know what, I don't know, guys, I haven't read about that, versus the times when I do know the answer. There's an inevitability that you will feel good about yourself, but it's just keeping an eye on that and being able to share that with people close to you. I'm saying this because it has been something I've had to deal with at times. Here's the thing I said to myself. I want to be a top seeker of knowledge, not necessarily top person who knows the most. And this is something that I've said to people on calls before, and I've got very comfortable in Q&As now because people will ask questions, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if I don't know the answer and I don't know what to say, that's fine. What people will learn about me, hopefully, I've a lot of drive to seek the answer. I did a talk in East London about what makes the Bible special. It was done online several years ago, and they did this Slido thing where people would ask questions on a live basis. So people would live questions would come at me, and you had no idea what they were. Mike and Jack and everyone fielded the questions to me, and I got them on the spot. And I got a couple of questions that were very difficult. I got one particular question, and you know when you just don't get time to think at all, and then everybody's waiting. There's hundreds of people or more just waiting on your answer, and it was one of the most liked questions. And I'm sitting there going, I think I waffled a bit. And you know what? It started to bother me slightly at the end of the call. I did say I waffled a bit there. Do you know the best thing I did was two things. One, I acknowledged that I didn't know eventually, and two, I went back and researched and I put up a YouTube video on the very question, and I admitted in the YouTube video that I actually didn't really know, and I actually got feedback on not knowing and trying to sound like I knew. So I've got more comfortable, but I had to learn the hard way in this area. So it's just to say, maybe you're not dealing with that right now, but maybe you are. Maybe it's in there somewhere. Maybe it's lying dormant until you get invited to your first conference, until you get your first book published. And then that moment will come where you're like, I have to ditch the pride. I need to be open about this. So that's it. Another one that maybe you didn't expect. So seek God first, starting point. What is our starting point? Ditch the pride. Next thing, read widely. Maybe sounds a really obvious one. And this isn't going to contradict what I say in a minute, by the way, but credibility matters. You know, we don't want to be ignorant of important matters that are going on around us. I find this myself. So one of the reasons I started my master's in is the MTS now, James Mountain Theological Seminary. I think that's it. They've changed the name. One of the reasons I started it, as much as I love studying, I'm a very busy person with four kids and you know, busy. Anyone who spends time with me will always hear me saying how busy I am. But I think credibility mattered to my listeners. So there was an element, excuse me, there was an element of me wanting to study and looking credible, appearing somewhat credible. I enjoy doing it anyway, but I knew that it would be beneficial for me to be credible. And that's where reading widely is helpful as well. If there are topics that are on the news or very important topics in theology and you've not got any idea, that can work against you. One of the things I'd say about this for myself is, and maybe even on this call, to be honest, there's people that are much better at this than me. This would not be necessarily a default strength of mine. I speak to lots of teachers, or like would-be teachers or people who have the teaching bent, and they're reading all the time. One of the things I've learned about myself, if I wanted to compare, although I know we shouldn't do it so much, is there's people I meet, teachers I respect, and I would probably have a weaker knowledge at times, broadly speaking, but I don't mind too much. I think for me, my logic and there's other factors that I have that I think are strong, which mean I don't necessarily get intimidated by that, but I do recognize that I could read more. Because I think personally for me, it would slightly reduce my effectiveness at a wider or broader teaching ministry. If I was leading or running a wider teaching ministry, it would weaken that slightly because I would need to read more broadly than I do because I have niche interests that I get really excited about. Um, and then I won't necessarily read other things. So I think this is a super important point. But again, there may be people here I know for a fact that are very, very good at this. And here's the two options I remember reading about in the past. You may have heard these before. You may have heard me sharing these before. Is there's kind of two options as a teacher. There may be more than this, to be honest. I'm being a bit black and white with this, but categorical. But the first one is that we will be case makers, or the second one is that we will be expert witnesses. I like that description. So especially in the field of apologetics, you'll be someone who has a broad knowledge of a lot of things, and you try to make a case that's pointed towards a particular conclusion, or you're an expert witness. So in a court, you can have people that are called up to present evidence, or sometimes you'll have a ballistics expert on gunpowder or something, and they could be called in and they're an expert witness. So again, there's many people that we could classify that they're experts in a chosen field. So for me personally, I know for a fact that I'm a little bit more of a case maker than an expert witness. And I decided, how deep do I want to jump? I know Malcolm Cox has a book out, An Elephant Swimming Pool, and how he described the book of John. How deep do you want to go? So often I know that I personally would like to jump deeper in a topic, but I can get so deep that it becomes not helpful to the people that I'm trying to teach. So that's just read widely. I think it's very wise, very, very important. So that's the fourth one. So the fifth one then, and this is not contradicted, but it's also true, is pick an area of expertise. So anyone who wants to be a teacher, have more of a role teaching, have more opportunities to teach, I think that this is very important. Picking an area, and I'd say pick an area. It may come organically to you. Um, there's Mr. Payne looking in. I'll just tell it because it's on my screen. James. so so we have number five, pick an area of expertise. So despite what I just said about reading broadly and reading widely, it's important also to have key area or areas, at least it can be more helpful to have areas of expertise. And I say this because we're all quite different. Um, we're all notice things that other people don't notice. We all feel differently about certain things. You'll know when we all talk to each other, some of us like to talk about political slants, some of us don't. Some of us like talking about history, some of us like apologetics. There's many different areas. So we're all going to see things slightly differently. So which area is it for us? Maybe we know the area right now. Maybe there's a few areas. Maybe it's maybe there's something chipping away at us. For me, as I said, apologetics was the big obvious area for me. It might be history. I know Andrew mentioned it tonight. General, theology, just languages, biblical interpretation. Or it might get more niche, and I'll cover this a little bit. It could be things like women's roles, salvation, different areas of the Christian life, the sacraments, the Apocrypha me and James were talking about earlier. It might be a niche area. And again, that's maybe you could cover it broadly, but so having a few areas that you want to specialize in because they're going to be on your heart more. I think this has proved helpful for me. Again, I need to read more widely, but it has proved helpful for me to have areas of you know, supposed expertise or sort of a relative mastery, should I say? Not by your own admission, but by based on what other people say. So for me personally, I suppose authority of Scripture, was mentioned tonight about inerrancy. The level of authority that the Scriptures have. Um, evidences. This is ones for me. Evidences for God just generally. Maybe the woman's role at the moment. It's very pertinent and relevant. Um, and I would say baptism. I've wrote a paper on baptism, but I think it'd be better to describe that as salvation. I'm meeting an elder in the Presbyterian Church on this week, and we've been talking about infant baptism. One of his fellow elders in the church who I spoke to before, who called himself a heretic, has recently got baptized, not in our church, but somewhere else. So there's a lot of cards stacked up there and many conversations going on there. But I think what I'd say is that, again, having one or two areas and developing relative mastery. We're none of us are going to call ourselves masters. Leave that to other people. But there would be one or two areas that we'll probably have on our heart. And do you know what? When I meet with other teachers, it's often quite different. We have a different little lens of the world that we're in right now, and it's helpful if we do all do something slightly different. But then you'll also meet people who have a similar interest to you. So yeah, so pick an area of expertise, but also read widely. They don't contradict each other. Number six, very obvious to say, be open to input. So a teacher must be teachable, right? This makes sense. That we tell people whenever we're wanting to teach them more, as I say, to avoid the pride, that we tell people to give us input. But it just so might happen that we might give it back again. On Sunday, when I did 70 weeks, Daniel's prophecy, somebody came up and shared with me. Now these are niche situations that I experienced in church because I always tell people from the pulpit, please give me input. Sometimes I wish I didn't because it seems like everybody's happy to give me input sometimes, and I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. But I had one guy and I had to have a longer conversation with him because he's always skeptical about everything. And I had to say to him that he sees everything through the lens of atheism, even though he's a believer. And he admitted that this is him. So I've got some mild concerns about this situation. But then there was someone else that gave me input, which was great. I think personally speaking, if you're going to give somebody input, and I wasn't getting an issue with this, by the way, but if you're going to give somebody input on their sermon, make sure you say something positive to start with and also say what you got out of the sermon for yourself, because that's why we give the sermon, and then give some. It doesn't have to be in that order necessarily, and then give some input. I've taught myself to do this. I don't think it's right to go up. It deals with a negative heart. We can have a very negative heart that just goes up and immediately tells someone what they didn't like. Watch out for that. Honestly, I really would watch out for that. I think we all know what it feels like to be in the receiving end of that, and we don't want to be the one that does it. So anyway, so all I'm saying is be open, though. And if someone does do that, be gentleness and respect to the person that opposes you. Um, but yeah, so be open. Um, but with input, we want to get it in any area of our teaching, and I was glad. I think Mr. Rob Payne has joined us there. I was glad he did because I was going to mention him because I was going to say even in the way we communicate. So one of my favorite things to do is communicate clearly. I could tell as a physio that I was called in all the areas I worked. I was called the explainer. I love to explain things. I love to be clear. I love to maybe repeat things too many times. I love to just use my hands, which you can't see so much of them on Zoom tonight. But one of the areas that limited me with communication, Mr. Payne will know what I'm going to say here, is the words that I would choose to use. And he wasn't the only one. So I had a habit from my upbringing of using terms that weren't right. I said the word them instead of those all the time. I think I still use seen instead of saw and vice versa. A little colloquialisms from where I'm from. I speak too fast many times as well. So I've had loads of input on my grammar, on my speed, on whether do you know what I don't do? I don't smile enough. Although you know what, there's some teachers I'm skeptical of them because they smile too much. I don't know whether it's just me. I'm like, I like seriousness of speech, but I do need to learn to smile more. So anyway, I've had input on all levels of my communication. Be an open book. If you want to inspire to teach, there's nothing off the table. You want to have input on the way you say things, what you say, and maybe how you came across when you were saying that particular thing. So be open to input is the sixth one. The last one we're going to look at then is identify needs and do something. So um, we want to go on and teach. We've got ideas and plans and things we want to do, but we have to remember it's not our axe we're grinding here. God's not giving us the platform so we can get our ideas out there. So we can get that thing that's been bugging us for the past few months or years that we want to make sure everybody knows about it. And that God has given us the platform to do that. God has given you the platform if you do get the platform and whatever level you get that platform. And First Peter 4:10 tells us, why God would do such a thing. Why has he put this message in the hands of this person, of one of us on the call or with me or whoever it is? And this was my mantra. This is one of my mantra scriptures. Verse 10. Each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Whatever gift you have, guys, it's exciting being on with teachers, people that want to teach more. It's exciting to be on with you guys. I can learn so much from other teachers. But you have that gift for a reason, and it's not for yourself. And I know I'm stating the obvious to some of us. It's for the benefit of other people. So it's not our axe to grind. We're not up there preaching because of what we need to say. So it's important that we can identify what the needs are. We may have our own needs, and that may drive some of our study, but what are the needs around us? Now, I say this also, I added the last little bit in there, because what should follow from identifying needs is that we do something. Now, why am I saying this? Well, I'll be honest with you. In my time in working in so many different fields, I was one of four regional coaches for the PIP assessments in the UK, and I dealt with a lot of different types of people in my time as a physio as well, and even now in clinics and so on in the hospital, and then even as in the ministry. I would suggest that there's a lot of teacher types that are not always that practical, struggle with being pragmatic, struggle with being decisive. Not always, and I'm not suggesting that we're always decisive and there's no room for indecision and that we'll always know how to move on the chessboard every single time. But there's a general theme I've noted myself over time with people who like to learn, like to study, but don't move on that. Um, and that's why I say, if you want to teach and you feel it on your heart and you read a lot and you've got lots of thoughts and ideas, and it might sound very simplistic, but go and do something. I think for myself, just clearing the screen here. I think for myself, it wasn't always like this, but I would say this is the way I operate. And I'm not saying we all operate like this, because I know that, as I said before, there's people on this call that read way more widely than I do. But I would say in the last 4 years, I wouldn't have read anything that I didn't go and share or teach about. Now, I'm not saying that we don't do that. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is, for me personally, my time being what it is, everything I read I then have to go and share it, do a video on it, teach it at church, prepare material on it, develop acronyms and develop a teaching ministry from it, or whatever the case may be. Get with someone, share it with someone. And I'm sure many of us are the same, but I think that's super important. If you find yourself that you lack in that area, please reach out to people who are maybe good at putting ideas into fruition. There are people that help me with this from time to time, but I think as a physio, I would generally be quite pragmatic. So I know, as people often hear me say, I know my strengths and weaknesses. But, Romans 12 tells us, teachers teach. So we need to teach. If it's on our hearts, we need to go and do something. I remember talking to James a few years ago, and he had all these thoughts and ideas. The guy thinks all the time, so much going on in that head. Sometimes I was worried about him, but I think he's now getting the stuff out there. I'm relieved. I'm relieved for James. He's now getting himself. He's been able to share. But Romans 12:7 says, if your gift is serving, then serve. If it's teaching, then teach. You've got to find ways to teach. You're going to explode. God has given you a mind, an intellect, a desire, a drive that you simply must use. And I say this tonight because I know that it's not always a strength for everyone to seek opportunities and use your gift. And again, you may need to seek help for that. How do I do that? What is that? I say this tonight. I mean, I was sitting as I said, I had a massive desire to teach. I wasn't getting any opportunities. So I decided, I think I started with a podcast. I realized that I think I was the only person I've known in church that always wanted to preach. Now, I don't think it was out of a desire to be seen. I just like to talk and share. So I started a podcast based on questions that I had heard, and I wanted to look into them, apologetic challenges that I felt myself personally, doubts that I'd felt. So I started a podcast channel. I was putting it out. And all I can remember was it felt like, when you're going to, well, I was going into the podcast and there was no listeners, no views, no nothing. And I thought, do you know what? There's so many times I felt like giving up. I started a YouTube channel over COVID. And then eventually one thing led to another, and I got appointed for one day as a teacher, and I got into the ministry full time, and it just felt like God kept giving me one thing. But I don't know how many times I felt like stopping because it felt like no one was listening, no one cared. But do you know what though? Like I said at the start of this, I knew in my heart that God had given me the ability to do this. the desire to do this, and I knew that I need to do this. And you know what? I went away on a retreat a few years ago, and someone said to me that their daughter became a Christian, and part of the reason they got converted was they watched my videos on YouTube. And I've heard that a few times, things like that. And you know what it's like? You just need to hear that once. You don't need to hear that 50 times to be encouraged to keep going. So, as I say, find ways to do it, find ways to teach. There's the point. So, seek God first. You know, what is your starting point? Ditch the pride, read widely, pick an area of expertise, be open to input, and identify needs and do something. So, here we are, though. I've done something, though. I didn't realize I was going to do this. In putting this together, I was using a thing that I like to do in teaching. I thought it would be wise to do it. So you'll see the first letter of each word there. I've underlined it. So here's the quiz for us, guys. You can just unmute yourself and shout it out. Can any of you guys make a 7-letter word with the following letters? I'm renowned for my acronyms, and this is what I've done. I've done this as a way of. I think Andrew will be a strong contender here. No pressure on you, Andrew.
Orders,
But
orders,
orders is definitely.
rodeos.
So there actually is a 7-letter word in here, and it's my acronym to remember this particular lesson as I go. And I may do more writing on this, but what we'll give is like an hour and 20 seconds. To be honest with you guys, I wouldn't have got it myself on the so I'll give us like 10 seconds. Unless you want longer, you can let me know. We did play Countdown. We got the Countdown game in the house the other week, and was playing my daughter. I think I'm beating her at the minute, but I don't think I'll keep beating her for very long.
Dossier.
Put you guys out of your
Dossier.
out of your misery. Oh, he got it, Simon. Oh, well done. Tell us all what it is, Simon.
Dossier.
Dossier. Dossier, indeed.
Right.
So I love an acronym, and this I love an acronym because it helps me remember exactly what it is that I'm saying and doing. So my dossier for helping people, for helping developing teachers. And that's my acronym. It's not in the order that I presented it in, but if I remember that word and anybody asks me what they were, so that's me just showing off one of the things that I like to do. I don't mean showing off literally, but doing one of the things that I always like to do when I'm teaching people is to kind of come up with something memorable. So dossier, well done, Simon. Good job indeed. So you can see them all there, the first letters of each of the words. I do this quite a lot. So the last little bit I was going to get us to do then was to assess ourselves if you're happy enough. You don't need to reveal the answers to me or everyone else. You can just do it for yourself. So at the start it says there, put ourselves on the spectrum best to worst. Now, we may not want to do this for everybody based on these 7 things. So on the left, you've got worst, 0. And then on the other side, you've got 10 best. I like this as a visual analog scale that we use in the world of physio and medicine, also known numeric reading scale. So it's a way, I do this all the time. People are fed up when listening to me about it, but it really helps me visually. So then just below that, I did it for myself. So I asked myself today, you know, what's my best to worst of the 7 things that I've mentioned? And like I said, guys, there's more things in this. It's just the 7 things that I felt were very important. So on the right-hand side for me, just below there, I put my best down. This is a really risky thing that I've just done, guys. Can you believe that I said the best thing I was best at was ditching my pride? That's this Moses-esque of me to say such a thing. I may be severely humbled for this, but I did put it over there. I feel like I've got much pride, but for some reason it doesn't exist in the world of teaching. It exists in my gym world and other worlds, so I'm not devoid of pride. But anyway, I put it on the pride on the around the D there, so 8.5. The starting point, I was fairly decent at getting started. You'll have to remember my score is higher here because these are the things that I came up with. If I picked 7 things that I wasn't so good at. Anyway, identifying the needs, I put it down at 7.5. There's the I. SE, seek God first, 7. Maybe some of us don't like doing this, and if you don't, that's fine. I just do. It's just the way I operate. So you got the SE, then O is the open the input, and then you've got the E, which is expertise area, and then R was the read widely. So what did that mean for me? Well, what that meant for me was, I thought I had this down. I've lost the slide. Oh, there it is. Is I developed the future action plan based on this. What do I need to work on? Well, personally for me, I do think I need to read more widely. So I often go to the apologetics books, the evidences book, the things that I enjoy, or masters related material. I don't always like reading things that don't interest me personally. So I need to grow in that a little bit. I also need to get a bit clearer in my area of expertise, which might not sound like it makes sense, but I think I could get better and clearer on exactly what it is that I want to do and what my area of expertise might be. And is it changeable? It can obviously change a little bit. And then the last one, then the third one, just more open to input. I do seek input. I do share very openly, but I think I could do it better by seeking input more. So you guys can do that if you want. You can share your findings with me or with all of us, or you can keep it to yourself. Or you can drop off the call because you're despairing. This thing was really bad, and then we can phone you later on. But this is again the 7 areas for me. What this did for me was it helped me to see what areas can I work on, maybe need a bit more work. There's always going to be something, because if everything is 10 and you've got one thing that's 9, well, hey, let's take that as the weakest one. There's always something to grow in, and that's the exciting thing. So that's your key lessons for aspiring teachers. I'll leave that up, guys, and you can do that, share about it or not, whatever the case may be. And I think we've got time for a bit of Q&A, James, and a time maybe to even share about this. If
Fantastic. Fantastic. I love that. Thank you much. I'm going to stop the recording now, I think, and not cover the Q&A, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.